If you're afraid that AI will take your job as a translator, watch this video. Hi everyone, it's Andre and this is episode number 24 of the Localization Podcast. This time, my guest is Oksana Tkach, the CEO of Metamova. And in this video, she will teach you a lot of things about NLP and the practical usage of NLP in our industry. More importantly, she will share her idea inspired by blockchain, where translators can contribute to and use a shared empty engine that wouldn't be owned and controlled by anyone. So it's a very radical idea that's based on the shared economy. And I invite you to listen and watch the full episode of this podcast. So here we go. I have a new guest here. This time is Oksana Tkach. I hope I'm saying this correct, from Ukraine.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Very nice.
You're the CEO of Metamova, right?
Correct.
So how is your day and where exactly are you located?
Oh, well, I'm located in Lviv, Ukraine. That's in Western Ukraine. I am in my office, which is also my home. And I am currently under quarantine in isolation. Yes, I'm trying not to leave this place. So a little bit depressing, but yeah, getting a lot of work done.
How is the situation with the virus in Ukraine?
It's actually really slow because just less people travel here, I guess. So we had like 1 death and 3 confirmed diagnoses. So super slow, but we are still taking precaution because it seems like the right thing to do. So yeah, we are just like all canceling all events and it's okay. Everything's fine.
Yeah, you told me about your living conditions when we had our previous call together before this interview. So how did that happen? Like, how did you end up having your office and bedroom in the same place?
It's such a weird situation. So I was looking for an office and I couldn't find the one that I liked, like for my team, right? Because I have a team of people. But I found this weird place, this weird space that was basically the owners. They bought all of the apartments on the one floor and they merged them into this giant office. But I just needed 1 room. But they were looking to rent a lot of this space to someone. And then, weirdly, my roommate was moving to Berlin, and so we were losing our old apartment. And I was like, I'm just going to move in here because it looks really cozy. And so basically, I have this studio apartment in the one corner of this floor, and then we have a separate entrance for my guys in our little office, but then they are also connected by another entrance that like goes right into my bedroom. So I literally live like I can hear them come into the office in the morning while I'm still in my bed, which is so bizarre, but also it's also kind of really handy because I just don't stop working, and I've done so much work in the past 2 months.
Yeah, I know you told me that you usually like wrap it up like around midnight your time, right?
Yeah, it's not super healthy, but that's how it ends up being. Yep.
Right. Do you remember how did you have the limited space when you were growing up?
What do you mean?
Like when you were a kid, like with your family. Did you live in a big house, small house? So
we lived, like when every time you see like a movie about Eastern Europe, you see those like block buildings. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
Like my parents got this apartment for free in the 90s, but it was like 2 rooms and a kitchen, so I had to share a room with my sister, so it was pretty crowded. And this is probably the first time in my life that I have this huge space all to myself, and it feels really good.
So do you remember like what kind of kid you were in high school?
What kind of a kid?
Yeah. Like were you like a popular one? Were you the nerdy type?
No. Oh, these questions are really triggering me.
Why? Explain.
I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't popular. I was just very kind of I was a nerd. I liked YouTube.
So I guess you are young, because when I was growing up, there was no YouTube. The internet was barely starting.
So it was like YouTube was starting when I was like 13, and I got good internet at that time, and I was like, okay, I have discovered the internet. That's where I'm living from now on. Because I don't know, it just felt like just felt closer to the way I was feeling than the culture in Ukraine at that time, or the people at my school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just kind of lost and just in need of some direction.
Did you think that you were like the forward-thinking person in Ukraine? Is that what you meant? Like,
I was just dissatisfied. I don't know if you would call it forward thinking. It's just it kind of drives you to look for something else. I felt like something was wrong. Am I forward thinking right now? I don't know. I like to solve problems. I don't like when things aren't working well. Who knows?
So what were your interests like in high school? How did you already have like some interest in like language or linguistics?
Well, I discovered YouTube, and I was like, I want to understand these people. So I just learned English. I think I was fluent in English at like 16, just because I was watching all of this stuff and be like, I will not stop watching this until I understand what they mean. So that was cool. I don't think I'm like super linguistically gifted. I think I really wanted to learn English because it was somehow important to me. And then, I think it was around when I was 16, I found this article on Wikipedia about computational linguistics, and which was basically like, you can quantify language, like you can take language and explain it in numbers. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's what I want to do. And so I decided that that's what I was going to do. And it took me about 10 years to start getting real projects. So I was 16, now I'm 26, and I'm getting like really cool big projects right now. So 10 years of studying, but yeah, I think I got there.
So yeah, I think we can like break it down a little bit, like this 10 years of your journey. So what are like your options, like when let's say you're a high school student and you find this interest like in language? Like, did you have a chance to study something related to it, or what did you do like right after high school?
Yeah, it was a problem because there were programs in computational linguistics and what is right now called natural language processing, but like they were in Stanford or in somewhere in Europe, and they cost money, and we didn't have any money, so like the opportunity was kind of limited. And at that time, I did not believe that I could even like get a visa to get out of Ukraine. That was just like not in my mindset. So I decided, and I remember thinking, well, if I don't have the same baseline, right, as other people in the world, then I guess I'll have to do something to prove that I deserve the same treatment, even though other people don't have to prove that. So I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna work hard until I get to the same level. So I decided to go study translation. That's how I got into translation, because I felt like, well, I can learn programming at any time, right? But linguistics is way more kind of innocuous, and it's not like there aren't good courses online for linguistics. So I wanted to get like a really classic education in linguistics. And also I thought, well, if I'm already fluent in English, then it's going to be easier for me. And it was. So that was that was a good move, because I didn't have to study as much. So I basically ended up studying linguistics, and I got a job in basically translating. So my last year of college, I started to translate for this agency for Google products, so Google Localization. And that's how I found out about localization. That was really cool because it's kind of like technical language. And I also started to learn Python, the programming language. So if you're interested in this field, I recommend highly to start with Python. And
how did you discover Python? going from translation? Because like I also discovered Python because, recently everybody's talking about machine learning, deep learning, and all these things. So like the first course that I found was like Python. Like Python is the one thing. Is this kind of similar to how you discovered Python and all these programming and how it relates to linguistics?
Yeah, so I was just kind of researching where should I start if I want to do computational linguistics, and I found somebody recommending Python and probably R. And Python is like it's really kind of readable because it was created to kind of read as a human language. So it's great for somebody who's kind of into like has a brain that's more into arts. It's a bit more clear. And it's also better, just the way the language is structured, it's better for processing text. So Python is great for language, natural language. But then when it comes to, so machine translation and data science, they are very much connected to computational linguistics. So it's kind of like almost one field. And it's kind of easier to do machine learning in Python as well. So that was like, I don't think all of this reasoning that like all of these reasons that I know now went into that decision. I was just kind of like randomly trying to do something, and I just kind of eventually did the right choice.
Right.
Made the right choice. Yeah. So yeah, I just started doing something, anything.
How did you like your first translation jobs? Did you feel like that's the thing that you want to be doing, or was it just like a step to NLP?
Oh man. I'm not the best translator.
That's okay.
Sometimes when I'm like inspired, I can do something cool, but I'm not consistently like, it's very rare for me that I am translating and I am like in the flow for hours and hours. That happens for me with programming. But because I worked as a translator for probably like at least 3 to 4 years, and I did like big translation jobs, but it was almost like I was just kind of forcing myself to do it because I had to make money somehow. But I just feel like there are so many people that are passionate about the process of translating, and to me it's kind of like, I know I can do it, but it's not something that excites me. And that is not I admire people that enjoy translating.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I had the same thing with project management. Like my career started as an engineer, so I always saw the project managers as the gods, who could make all the decisions, and they were dealing with clients, and they were organizing and planning. But like once I started doing it for like a couple of years, and once I kind of like feel like I figured it out, it just lost like the excitement for me. Because to me, it's more like a production line where not much exciting is happening every time you get a project, because you basically do the same things just with like different source files.
It's not as mysterious anymore.
Yes, exactly. I think that's where I'm kind of like you, because I also like to solve problems, because problems usually are something new. And if the problems are already recurring, which is also what I have to do, I just call it customer support, because you don't have to figure it out.
That's what localization engineering is.
Okay.
Problems that you can't automate, so you just have to solve them over and over again.
Yeah.
But isn't project management exciting when there is like a big mess and you have to fix it? Yes,
exactly.
That's the coolest part.
Yeah, that's the... I don't know how to call it in English. It's like if you have too much mess, like on an ongoing basis, it's very difficult for people to keep up with it. But actually, yeah, I would definitely say that when you get a mess, like you should look at it from the positive perspective, because that's where you can actually like learn something or like see like where your limits are, because that's where you have to actually start using your brain and figure things out, like how you can deal with the mess versus just doing, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to get the project done.
Yeah. Well, what I've done with my life right now recently is that all of the work that I do is just fixing messes. So that is super stressful.
Okay. We'll get to that later. So let's just try to briefly like cover what you were doing like after the school. I have looked at your LinkedIn profile and you work for a couple of companies. Most of your titles are either localization specialist, which I don't know exactly what it means to be a specialist, and also something to do with NLP. So can you maybe give us a quick tour of what you were doing before you started your own company?
Yeah, well, localization specialist is basically what I call a translator, or at that time, what I call a translator, because it just sounds fancier. Well, but also, like, translation and localization are kind of different, and a localization specialist has to do all of this stuff with like translation memories and CAD tools. So I chose that title. Yeah, and I was doing that because I was learning to program, but also I kind of liked the localization field. It was kind of exciting to me. So I was just kind of translating, and I worked for BlaBlaCar, the company, the ride-sharing company in Europe. So that was a really cool gig because the team was just really great and the content was really fun, and it was a really big challenge because it was like creative content, right? Like even the interface had to be creative and like snappy because Google is very sort of strict, and that was like my brain was just melting. I was trying to force myself. I mean, it would always come out fine at the end, but in the process I was like, I have no idea how to make this text more engaging. But in the end, I think I learned some writing skills during that job as well. And then and when I was working for them during that time, I started to get NLP jobs, my first NLP jobs, because kind of the market was growing a little bit.
Did you look for the jobs on your own, or did it just fall into your lap somehow?
No, nothing fell into my lap at that time. It was brutal. Because I was feeling really weird because I was learning all of these really advanced, complicated stuff, but then I didn't feel like there was demand. And also everybody was talking about AI and data science and blah, 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 and natural language processing, but there were no good projects. And I also was super intimidated because that's where neural networks started to become popular. But I was just only was starting to understand how programming works and how it applies to language. But now it's like you have to learn about neural networks and all of this advanced calculus stuff. So I would like go to a workshop, and I would be at a workshop, like a neural networks workshop, with like these programmers, like 40-year-old programmers, and they were so much faster than me. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Yeah, but eventually I started to get tiny jobs doing computational linguistics, and then kind of...
So okay, maybe it's not the right time, but what does it mean getting a tiny computational linguistic jobs, and what exactly those jobs look like? Explain it to us mortals, because we just know like translation, localization, but computational linguistics, that's something super foreign to me. So what exactly is expected of you?
So one of the first jobs that I got, we were building this engine, so this huge app that would look at a text and automatically find named entities. So like names of countries, people, addresses, whatever. But it was supposed to work for like 16 different languages. And that included like Turkish and Finnish. And so one of my tasks was to evaluate. So we had this thing called a lemmatizer. So a lemmatizer is an algorithm that takes any word in any form and it tries to convert it to like the original dictionary form, you know? Like if it gets the word dogs, then it has to convert it to dog. Like it has to know that as is just an ending. So my job was to take the results of the Finnish lemmatizer and check it. And I was like, but I don't speak Finnish. And so I had to like go and figure out how the nouns are, like how the forms of the nouns are kind of changed in the Finnish language, which is so weird. Like they have so many different forms. Like they don't use prepositions, because instead of preposition, they would just like put a different form of the noun.
So how did you approach that problem? Like, did you go and learn the Finnish grammar, or?
Yeah, you go and read about Finnish grammar, and then you use like Google Translate to, or like you go and look at a dictionary and see, okay, this word probably means house, but then in the dictionary it has this form, but the lematizer showed a different form, so it's probably a mistake. So that was a challenge. So that is something called, so that was like a perfect computational linguistics project example.
Can you give us a context of like what was the real application of that project that you were doing it for? Like, why would they need to grab the nouns?
I'm not gonna disclose what exactly that company was doing.
That's okay. Just
but like for instance, if you have a chatbot, so an intelligent like conversational agent, and it can book flights or something. And you can text it, hey bot, I need a flight from like New York to whatever, to Kiev. It'll automatically identify the names of the cities, and then if you texted the date, it will also automatically identify the date, and then it'll use this information to send a request to a website with flights, and it can just like book the flight for you. So it's something called natural language understanding. It's not just a set of characters anymore. It actually kind of extracts some useful information from a sentence.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just reading about NLP yesterday on Wikipedia, so that's just the rough surface. There was the natural language understanding, and then there was the natural language. Is it creation? Generation.
Yes. So when you hear the news about like scientists invented a neural network that generates fake news, so they basically trained a neural network on a bunch of real articles, and in the process of training, it just kind of looks at the frequencies of words and how the words combine, and which words appear in the beginning of the sentence and the end, and the structure of the sentence, and then it can kind of like tries to generate something that corresponds to the rules of our actual language. So it reads like it was written by a human, but it's actually just kind of like numbers.
Another thing that I learned yesterday was the statistical learning, kind of like based on rule sets, right? And then the machine learning. So like in your first projects, were you creating the rules, or was it also already based on machine learning?
Yeah, so that was a rule-based project. So basically what we did, later on, we would also like write, okay, if you have the word like company followed by a capitalized word, then that capitalized word is probably the name of the company. So that is something called rule-based NLP, because you get a bunch of linguists that are really good at understanding language, the structure of language, and then they write down really like formal definitions. Like they describe patterns that we see in the language, all of the patterns that we use to say the name of the company. So we just kind of like we are using this sort of a subjective language, the subjective knowledge of the language to kind of describe it. And then the other method is machine learning, in which we take a lot of data, a bunch of raw data, and works really well if it's labeled. So if somebody, like a human, went and like highlighted all of the names of the companies, then we can use machine learning to objectively look at the context that we see, the words that we see before and after the company name, and then we kind of let an algorithm define the rules. But it's not even the rules, it's kind of connections and patterns and numbers. But it's not done by a human, it's done by a computer that just like does math on the words that it sees in the data set. So those are like the two major approaches to language.
The example that you gave us, you said it was like a first tiny job. So how did the later jobs that were like more complicated look like?
Okay, so I worked at this startup and I was creating a bunch of chatbots for them, like super intelligent. I mean, to me, because it's my work, I was like, that was that was super intelligent because other chatbots that I see on the market right now are not that intelligent. Yeah, so it was basically a chatbot trying to pretend to be a person, and like you weren't supposed to understand that it's a chatbot. And then I did a bunch of neural networks for this other company, and then I was just kind of, so this was about 2 years ago, and I just kind of hit a wall. I just didn't like the projects that I was getting. And I was just kind of dissatisfied with how everything was going, and I kind of missed translation as well because I had left that field for a few years. And then somebody approached me and he said they needed localization engineering. And I decided, okay, I'm just going to open a small agency and hire some people. And because I also really wanted to learn about localization engineering and how all of the technical side of translation works. And so I just said, okay, whatever. I'm just going to take all of my savings and open this tiny company. And that was a year and a half ago. And right now we basically we split. So we have some people doing localization engineering and some people already doing NLP.
Yeah. So before we get to Metamova, I'm still curious about the chatbots because I did work on localization of one chatbot for one of our big customers. And my very amateur question about chatbot is, let's say you have a chatbot that helps to sell, I don't know, clothes, right? You can chat with the bot and maybe you can make a purchase with the bot, right? And then let's say you have a different company which sells, I don't know, they sell protein powder or protein shakes or whatever. So so my first question is, do these different companies need to have like their own chatbot created from scratch? Or is there something like a commercial chatbot which helps with e-commerce in general?
Okay, so the problem with chatbots, especially with e-commerce chatbots, is that they have to have very narrow context to work properly, which means that for each sort of task, you would basically, for each interaction, you would need a programmer or an NLP engineer to sit down and sort of reprogram it. So if your interaction is the same, like a greeting would be the same for everybody. But if somebody wants to order protein powder as opposed to clothes, you would have to go and completely redo that particular interaction. So basically, you would just need to start a new project for each new chatbot. And I mean, there are ways to sort of make it faster and scale it a little bit, but I don't really. I had, when I was working on chatbots, I had this idea, why aren't we exchanging interactions, right? Like, why can't I take somebody else's programmed greeting thing and just use it for me? But that's what Amazon does with Alexa and Google with Google Assistant, because they let people code for different kinds of interactions, but then they don't really share it. So they just hoard it. And they have this enormous, not data set, but it's just this enormous program that kind of knows all of the phrases that the person can say. So they are building this giant, all-powerful chatbot. But you can only contribute. You don't really have access to other people's code.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. That's basically what I was asking about, because I'll give you an example. And again, it's something that I'm not totally knowledgeable about. When you talk about empty engines, right? So you have like the empty engines from Microsoft, from Google, right? So you can like use them as like your baseline, and then you just feed them your own data, if I understand it correctly. So is there something like that for chatbots? I think like that's what you were trying to point out. Like if there's something like a big, like well-trained, very smart chatbot that you can use as a baseline, and then just kind of like optimize it for like your own context or for your own needs.
Okay, so the problem is that chatbots don't really work on neural networks yet. There are some efforts to do that, but the problem is chatbots that are trained on neural networks, it's very hard to predict the response. So you can create something that kind of simulates a conversation, but if you need a chatbot to say, okay, here are all of the shirts and the prices and the colors that we have, that has to be hard coded, because a neural network, or at least the neural networks that we have right now, you can't really guarantee that that's what it's going to respond with. So machine translation is different because you just kind of throw a bunch of sentences and it kind of gauges how the language works in relation to the target language. But with chatbots, when you have that really specific task of being basically an online store but through a chat, you need to really hard code a lot of stuff. So when I say a super intelligent mega chatbot, I say that it's complex. It has a lot of parts, but the parts themselves are pretty simple, right? So it's not being trained, it's just being expanded. But machine translation works a little bit differently.
So then let's get to your final stage. Where are you now, right? CEO of Metamova. So you final stage. Yeah. Saying the word final stage when there's coronavirus out there is probably not the best idea, but let's say the current stage of your life. So you mentioned that you got there because somebody asked you to do an engineering job. So I'm wondering how they knew about you, because you didn't mention engineering before. So that's the first question. And why did you think that you actually need to create a company around that?
Oh, that was a really weird kind of synchronicity moment. So at that time, I was living in this weird studio, and the floor was like full of kind of students and people my age, like young people, and we all knew each other. And this one guy, he had kind of like a mentor somewhere I don't remember in what country, like Stockholm or something, some Scandinavian country. So my friend's mentor guy met the guy who will become my client, and and they just kind of passed that information to Ukraine. And so my friend was like, do you know what localization engineering is? Because I need to find some people. And I was like, yes, I was born to do this. And and he just connected us, and I sent my resume, and it just said that I had experience in translation and in programming and in data science. So that was kind of nice. And I just decided, so the guy, my client, he offered that I could either do some work for them, or I could have a team and kind of take on more work. And I decided that I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to see if I could like dare to hire some people and say, work for me, which was really weird. So I was just like, oh, yeah, of course. I think I would be a great boss. and I just did it.
Okay. How did you pick the name? What does it even mean? Does it have any meaning?
Oh my god. Yeah, it means meta language in Ukraine.
Oh, Mova is language? Mova is language?
Yes, Mova is language in Ukrainian. It was just like, because I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to be doing NLP, eventually, right? NLP is you're using a programming language to describe a language. So meta seemed appropriate, but it also had like nice sounds to it, like M and open A. That was really kind of nice and feminine. And if you look at my logo, it's pink. My website is pink, which was, and when I hear that word, I kind of see pink, which is kind of really nice. And it's also a little bit political, because we are always having this, thing in Ukraine about the Russian and Ukrainian language. And when the Russians try to like make fun of people speaking Ukrainian, they will use the word Mova. So I was like, I'm gonna add some political stuff to the name of my company.
I like it. There's so many subtle hints.
Yeah.
your messages to the world. Yeah, I checked your website and I really like the design. It's a one pager.
Thank you. I did it myself.
Oh, nice.
The whole thing.
Awesome. Yeah,
I learned so much about hosting and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's another thing. Let's talk about that. So like you decided, okay, like I'm going to create my company, and then I'm just going to hire people and run the company. So did you also learn something about it on your own, or did you just improvise and learn on the way?
No, I like to say it was a dumpster fire. It was like, oh my God, where am I going with this? So what is going on? But yeah, I just kind of made a bunch of random decisions, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. So I had a goal that we were going to do this for a year. And so no matter what happens, we have to hold on for a year. Even if like I don't like the work, I don't like the client, like a bunch of people quit, I hired new people, it was like this whole thing. But I just always had this thing. I'm doing this for a year. And it was really weird because in a way if it's your thing, you can drop it at any time, right? But because nobody is making you do this. But if you promise this to yourself, it almost becomes kind of like a baby, because like when you have a baby, you're like, you can't go anywhere. Like you're stuck. Even if it sucks, you have to take care of the baby. So to me, it was like, well, now it's my baby and I just have to push through it. There were times where I just didn't have any money for a couple of months, because, that's how business works. And so we moved into a real office in September of 2018. And so this September of 2019, I kind of counted that as a year, and I was like, okay, now I can do whatever I want. And now it's so much more fun, because now I just kind of, first of all, I know that I can do this. And second, I don't have any like obligations to myself, I guess, anymore. So I just kind of do whatever I want, and it's much more fun.
Mm-hmm. So how were the early days of the company? Did you just have that one client and you had to figure out what localization engineering actually means?
Yeah. Oh my God. So basically we started doing work, I think, in June of 2018. So from June to September, I was just kind of really learning really fast. But all of these, because we got a bunch of accounts, and all of them had different types of processes. And so I had to hire people, make sure they understood what was happening, make sure they have like internet connection and computers, and then also learn about localization engineering. I traveled to where my client was. I stayed there for a few weeks. And then I think around like November, I was already kind of bored, because it was like, oh, okay, I know what engineering is. Yeah, so then it was just kind of like about business. Business was figuring out management and stuff like that was much harder for me than localization engineering.
You mentioned that you were doing a couple of accounts. So does it mean you got this couple of accounts through that one client?
Yeah, so the client, they could give us more work, right? So they could kind of cover my whole team. But I didn't feel comfortable having just one client. But it actually took me quite a while to kind of get brave enough to find new clients, because that's kind of hard. Like if you want to expand, now you need to hire someone new and pay them, but maybe the new client hasn't come in yet and you don't have the work to give them. Like that's much more complicated than just having one client. So that took me a long time, but right now we are kind of like, it's much more balanced because we have several clients and sort of different directions that we are going in.
So I saw this on your website and now it kind of like makes sense because you started with engineering. But can you maybe explain to me why somebody would just outsource localization engineering versus going to, like, let's say, vendors that can do the whole localization in one package?
Because this was a vendor. So they were doing the whole localization but they were looking to kind of get more engineers. And I guess at the place where they were, there weren't enough people. So they tried to outsource to Ukraine. So Ukraine is a popular place to outsource to. And to me, it was a great opportunity, so I just took it.
When you started the company, was your kind of like a vision from the start that you will eventually do something about NLP, and like engineering is just like, okay, like the first step to get off the ground?
Okay, so my initial plan, because also for this client, so we do engineering, but we also do a lot of development. And my initial plan was like, okay, if I'm doing development, they will eventually need NLP because it's a translation company. And I was so wrong. Because, newsflash, large vendors in translation aren't doing NLP, which I think is a huge mistake, but that's just kind of how the business works. And so I pushed it, and I kind of explained why they needed to do that. But it was just not, it's hard to get that kind of innovation implemented in a large company. So I had also hoped that I would find other smaller vendors, right? And do NLP for them. But I don't think there's space for that in the market. I don't think smaller maybe agencies do actual NLP. So they want to connect existing machine translation engines, but they don't really want to do custom NLP, which I thought would be really useful.
Yeah. Okay, so this is something that we already talked about when we had our first chat. And I come from probably the mindset that localization does localization, and we don't know much about NLP. But for you, to me, it seems like for you, it's very obvious that we need NLP. Can you actually explain to us, what do you mean that a translation vendor would use custom NLP? In which situations?
Yeah, I did a webinar about this once. So there's so many different tiny things that you don't you just think it's development, but it's actually NLP. Every translation process needs text pre-processing. So you have to split text into sentences, to segment it. And then, when you do QA, you have all of these plugins that do QA. How do they work? They look for terms in the source segment and then the corresponding term in the target segment. And that's really close to what I was doing in that NLP project with finding names of countries, right? So all of that automated quality assessment is basically NLP. It's just done by developers that are making CAT tools, and it's very often inferior because they don't really understand how language, the structure of language, they don't know what a lematizer is. So there are a lot of false positives and a lot of these kind of useless tips that the plugins give you. Oh my god, so many other things. Because when you work in localization engineering, right, you see all of these problems. Okay, you get text, there are some icons, now the icons won't convert to this other thing, now you have to find a way to do something with the icons, but that's also text. So when I do development, I use NLP algorithms to handle stuff like that, to do localization engineering. Make sense? No? Sometimes when you have different CAT tools, and for instance, you don't want to pay for Trados because Trados is super expensive, but your client is giving you a translation memory from Trados, but the translation memory has different segmentation than your translation memory. And so they are conflicting. How do you leverage that translation memory? Well, we built this algorithm that splits, kind of intelligently splits the original segments into sentences, because that segmentation was by paragraph, right? So the segment was a paragraph, but we needed a segment per sentence. So you're basically converting Trados TM into a different format of TM, but we were using an NLP algorithm to split just something called sentence boundary disambiguation. So there are a lot of tricks you can do to kind of save money to leverage the stuff that you have by using NLP.
Didn't you think of contacting like SDL or MemoQ or MemSource and kind of like help them improve their cat tools?
I mean, I've met the representatives at conferences, but to me, it's like I don't think they would care enough. I don't think they would invest enough resources for it to make sense to me to improve like their plugins.
Why do you think that?
I don't think they would value that as much. If something kind of works, if something works 70% of the time, if the stuff that their developers wrote works, then I don't think they need Oksana to come and save everybody. Because I used to think I'm gonna come and save everybody, but now I'm like,
yeah. I also have the hero complex sometimes.
No, I have this is wrong. It shouldn't be like this complex. But then everybody's like, we have budgets and
oh yeah,
stuff.
we have budgets. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay. Sometimes it makes more sense to leave the old things in place than to like try and disrupt everything. Sometimes disrupting is kind of more expensive to a company. So I gave up on trying to reason or make friends with companies like that. Okay, so my kind of global thing is I like to think about how artificial intelligence will work in the future, right? And I think it's the way we have it right now, it's not going to produce actual good AI, right? I believe we have to sort of make the economy more distributed for that to happen and make data make data aggregation more up to the owners of the data, right? But the way I started to think about this was in the context of the economy of translation. So my idea is I'm going to make this kind of small example of how I think AI should look, and I'm going to make it on like the basis of the sort of reinventing the translation process.
Okay, we're all excited to hear about it. So please give us some details.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, okay, so I believe that the translators should be picking the content they translate and also the actual users of the content, right? So the content that people want to see translated should be more expensive to translate, if that makes sense. Because right now what we see is companies have money and they have this like website that nobody really wants to see and they pay to translate that website. But like, what is the use? Okay, so we've expanded the kind of the content of one particular language, but not in the way that the users of the language want it to be. I think useful stuff should be translated, like Wikipedia, Coursera, whatever, I don't know, academic articles, whatever gives you more language, or whatever gives you more knowledge. Because right now, all of the knowledge is in English, and it's all centralized in English, right? That doesn't make much sense to me. But the way you can do it is to kind of give the translators the ownership of the translation memories and let them decide what to do with that. Because the big drawback that we have right now is all the translation memories that we generate, they are under NDAs and they all are on a lockdown by vendors. Because the clients that sent text for translation, they don't really care about the translation memories. They just want the stuff translated. And sometimes it needs to be released like in a month, okay, whatever. But they don't really care about this bilingual data. You know who really cares about the bilingual data of the way the translation memories look is data scientists, because we don't have enough data to train really good machine translation.
I'm thinking so many things, so I'm doing my analysis paralysis where I'm just silent and I don't know which question to ask.
But now I'm kind of like, okay, I've said so many things.
So
I have no idea.
So clients own the things, right? Because they're paying for it, essentially, right?
Yes.
And I'm not sure, like, if it's like in all cases, but I'm pretty sure that at least some of them are using the translation memories to train their MT engines. Do you think it's an exception?
Okay. So they probably, here's how it works from the point of view of data science. They probably used them where statistical machine translation was popular. Because statistical machine translation needs way less data to kind of start showing results. Then huge companies like Microsoft, they have their own machine translation, but that is because they have so many translation memories that they can actually train a neural network, because a neural network that produces much better machine translation results needs a lot of data. So probably companies like Microsoft do have their custom MT engine. But smaller clients, they don't have enough data to actually train their own custom engine. The one solution that already exists, but I'm not sure how many companies use it, is tuning. So if you know something called AutoML by Google, you can take Google's MT engine as a base, and then you can upload your translation memories. And then basically what happens is they kind of unzip the MT engine model file, and they kind of move the weights of the words in the direction of your translation memory. So what happens is the output is kind of still super intelligent the way Google's MT engine is, but it kind of favors the phrases and words that it saw in your translation memory. I don't think a lot of people use it, because to make this tuning thing, you need to upload the memories to Google, and they probably keep them because Google is interested in building a huge data set of translation memories. And I don't think a lot of clients allow that. So what happens is at the end, you can do this, but it's not really economically viable. And what vendors or clients or whatever end up doing is they just pay for MT API, like they pay Google to use their baseline basic MT engine, and they translate, and then they give the job for post-processing. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good at all, but just the mere fact that they are paying for post-editing and not translation allows them to lower the rates dramatically. And so that is the big injustice that I see right now. The rates are dropping, which means that there are more jobs because now more clients can afford to translate. But then the translators, I don't think the amount of work that they do right now in an hour is justified by the low rates that they are getting paid for post-editing. So the post-editing could be easier and much faster, but it's not. But we still have this.
It could be easier if what happened?
If we started to tune the machine translation according to the client's data, if we started to tune it according to the translator's style. Because very often the translators, as like artsy people, they make corrections just based on, well, I prefer this phrase. I think this phrase is grammatically correct, but I think it's like, whatever, doesn't sound good. So that takes time as well. But what if the machine translation was almost the way you would do it, but you are just now correcting like a missed word or a wrong pronoun or something. But that is kind of, right now, it's very hard to unlock it because we have Google that is kind of a monopoly and they have the ownership of this enormous engine. And then we have vendors that have ownership of all of these translation memories. And then we have the translators that I don't think they could make more money per word. I think they could do more work per hour and make more money like that. But it's not happening. So I think there is a big imbalance happening right now. And that is because we have all of this innovation. But I don't think our industry is adapting fast enough to the innovation that is happening. Because it's so kind of in the 90s. It's so kind of 10 years ago, but not the 90s, but 10 years ago. And it's so kind of bloated, that it's very hard to run when you have so many kind of uncomfortable things strapped to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, yeah. So you mentioned that, like, the word tuning, right? Did I get it right? Okay, tuning. So from what I understood, like, the main problem that you see with the tuning is that if I'm, let's say, like some small IT company, let's say in Silicon Valley, I'm a startup, and I do some translations, and if I want to use the tuning process, then the main risk for you is that if I want to use it, I have to basically give up my TMs to Google, right?
I think so. Because the other way would be to download Google's engine file, and they are not going to let you do that. So the other way is you upload it to Google, and there is no way that they are not keeping that data, because they are letting you use this thing for free. So the pay is that you're giving up the data.
But what is the danger for me if I give up the data? Like, we all give up the data in this age that we're living in, right? Constantly.
There is no danger. I would encourage to share data as much as possible. It's the NDA. And also you're making Google more powerful. So you're making Google more of a monopoly. And also Google, which means Google is free to raise the machine translation API prices however they want.
Oh, it's not like a free thing to use?
I think so. If it's like for amateur use, it's free, but then if you want to translate something like more than 1,000 words, it starts getting expensive.
I see. So what do you think is like the alternative to this?
Yeah, I think we should just all share the data in some secure way, and we should have a sort of a communal machine translation engine, which kind of belongs to no one as well, and this idea was inspired, in all disclosure, by blockchain. Because that was like the first thing that I've heard about that offered like a third alternative, right? Because what else do we have? We either have nothing or we have a monopoly. But now we have this third thing, or at least the concept of a third thing, where we could kind of all have equal ownership of the empty engine. But then we could also all equally contribute to it. So whatever translation job you're doing, it's updating the empty engine, but you're also getting paid for updating the empty engine. And it improves every day. But, okay, and this is an important point to make. People will argue that, empty engine, a neural network results, they stop getting exponentially better once you've used up 100 gigabytes or whatever of data. But my point as a linguist is that the way we use language changes every second. We come up with new words, there are new memes, there are new stuff that happens, there are new viruses, whatever, new breaking news. Which means that if you train your MT a week ago and you stop training, and you want to use it to translate something really important that you need to know right now, it doesn't know what's going on. So you have to always update it. It doesn't. So at some point, it stops being about language quality. It becomes about language use, right? It needs to be up to date always. And that's how I think AI and neural networks should work in all fields. They have to be updated the second something new appears online. But the only way to achieve that, the only way to make that data sharing safe, and the ownership safe, is to distribute the ownership. Because otherwise, the other option is give up all of your data to Facebook or Google, or don't share your data at all. Which is, I don't think that's the answer, because then we are stopping the innovation, and what's the point of that?
So let's talk a little bit. I like the idea, I like the vision. How would it work in practice? Let's say, how do I know that like the people that contribute to making the MT better are actually making it better? Because from your own experience, there are many bad translations out there, and what is good for me or bad for me may not be good or bad for some other people.
Okay, so this is the problem of translation assessment, right? Language quality assessment. And when I was a translator, this was so annoying to me, because the reviewers that would review my work, it would be one person, and the errors that they would find, they were very often not an error at all. So it's very much subjective. And I've been thinking about how to make this more objective. And for a while, I thought, well, maybe I will create a neural network that corrects bad language. But which by the way, something that MemSource has done recently, but they created a neural network that assesses MT results. But as I was learning more and more about how neural networks work, I realized that you would use the exact same algorithm as you would use for machine translation. So instead of creating something that improves language, it's the same process as creating something that translates perfectly from the standpoint of data science. There is no difference. Like, if you want to, the only way to know if a translation is, the only way to let an algorithm know if a translation is good is to create an algorithm that translates perfectly. That is the big problem. So that's why I'm really skeptical about using neural networks and stuff like that for quality assessment. And so what that let me realize is that then we need humans to assess language quality in any way. But how do you make that objective? And that also, this idea also comes from blockchain. Why not make it a consensus? So randomness is a big thing in blockchain, because randomness ensures security. If you don't know what happens next, it's impossible to hack a system. So if you don't know who is going to be assessing your translation, there is no incentive to submit a bad translation. The only way you get paid for your translation is if other translators think it's good. But if you don't know who the translators are, it's impossible to conspire with them. And there are so many problems with this idea, I know, because if you have a very small pool of translators, it's very easy to... So in blockchain, in decentralization, the bigger the network, the more secure it is, because then the randomness is very hard to predict. But yeah, so my kind of utopian idea, and by the way, who knows if it's going to work, Bitcoin is kind of working, but isn't working, I don't know. But this is just kind of what I spent my days thinking about. If we let's say 5 translators anonymously evaluate your translation, but then we only pay to the people that created or voted for the good translation, then the incentives are perfectly aligned, because it's completely objective, and it's in everybody's best interest to create a good quality translation.
You were mentioning this in the first call that we had, and I didn't say something, but it came to my mind, so let me say it now. In one of the earlier episodes, when I was still doing this on my own, when I was just going through like the latest articles like on social media about localization, and I was just talking about it, one of the articles that I covered was that how Facebook is evaluating machine translation quality. And it kind of like ties to what you were saying before, that we should be translating what the users actually want. So why should the quality be assessed by other translators? Why shouldn't it be assessed by users? So what Facebook does is that they feed to different people. They basically A/B test different empty outputs. And based on the engagements that the users have with this machine translation, they kind of like evaluate like which one is better.
Yeah, I guess it would work too. I guess I had been thinking more globally is in a way that if you have a translation on any website and you don't like it, you can report it and say, this is not, I don't understand what's going on here. But I mean, it's kind of hard. It's not going to work for everything. But yeah, you got to start somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I like that system that Facebook does, but their machine translation sucks. So I'm not sure if it's working very well for them. Okay. But actually, Facebook already has this really cool thing. They have Translators community. So do you know that the interface of Facebook is all translated for free into all languages? Because they have these communities, and they have this special app on inside Facebook, where it's very similar to Consensus, except it's not anonymous. So you get the English phrase, and then somebody translates it into, like, let's say Ukrainian, and then other members of the community vote, or they propose a new translation, and then whichever version wins, that gets posted as the translation of So I kind of took that idea from Facebook a little bit, but the problem about that is that it's crowdsourced and it's not. I mean, it's free, so they're just basically trying to get content. Another problem with that is that the data that they have from people translating for free, it's very hard to apply that to actual posts that people post, because that field is it's web interface. But then if they are trying to machine translate people's posts, it's completely different style. So it's not going to help them.
Yeah, it's UI versus user content.
Yeah. And also a huge problem right now, because to me, I mean, interface is important, but interface is very often intuitive, especially on our phones. So it's kind of easy, even if you don't know the language, it's easy to understand where to press. For me, more pressing is the problem of like translating Facebook posts or tweets or like stuff that people actually create, because like so many news nowadays are shared through Twitter. Like what is going on in China? Like the protests in China. Who knows? It's all in Chinese. So, but the problem is that all of the MT engines are trained on like very, very nice articles that somebody took from the European Union, or, the law articles or whatever, because there is no bilingual data for everyday language like that. Like, how do you teach an engine to translate memes? Like, we need to, there is no data set like that. So we need to generate a data set like that somehow.
Okay. So we talked about the big picture, and you mentioned to me that you already have something in progress. So can we talk a little bit about your solution, or like how you're going to test your assumption?
Big word. Okay. So I'm trying to build like a kind of a minimum viable product example of how I think this should look. And to me, the perfect source of the content that I want to use for this sample project is Twitter. So my idea is, how do we translate tweets effectively, right? Because Twitter is full of memes, it's very specific language. And I found out recently that until 2017, Twitter was also trying to let people translate tweets. but they closed it down. So I think it wasn't great results. Like I think people were just translating whatever or weren't translating at all. But I chose Twitter because it's a great example of a network, right? Because so tweets are either not popular at all or super, super popular, right? So you either get 5 likes or you get 20,000 likes. And so I am interested in taking those super, super popular posts. And also Twitter is interesting in the sense that if you don't follow somebody on Facebook, you'll never see their content. But on Twitter, if you don't follow someone, the repost mechanism works in a way that if a tweet is popular, it'll eventually reach everybody in the network. That's why Twitter is so cool. So my idea was, and also because Twitter has a really great API, so it's super easy to get the latest popular tweet. So my idea was, okay, let's get like the latest popular tweets and give people a way to go and sort of contribute and let their translations be evaluated by consensus. And then immediately when something is confirmed, we'll kind of like post it on Twitter, but as a repost. So you'll have a tweet and then you'll have reposts of that tweet, but in different languages. Kind of like a social experiment, whether that would work or not. Because my big question is, would people care enough? But the more popular a tweet is, I feel like the more people care to see it in their own language. So, yeah. So the backend is kind of more or less done. Now I'm kind of working on putting it together and making it usable. And then, I don't know, then we'll see if it's ever going to work. But I would like to put it out there and see how people react. Yeah. And the idea is, as more people translate, the more data we have. And so we can train our own engine that translates tweets. So the easier it is to translate tweets, so the more people translate, and the faster people translate, so the more data we have. And also the idea is that because we have this engine, we can now use it. We can now, sell it to other social media platforms, the use of it, and then use that money to pay the translators. And so the more you translate and the better you translate, the more money you make. So that is already kind of like a full circle digital currency translation coin type of a thing.
So are you planning to have like some third-party app that would use Twitter's API? Or are you thinking of somehow integrating it into Twitter? I'm not even sure if it's possible.
Yeah, you can have... So a couple of ideas that I had. We can have a separate website. We can have a plugin that you install on your browser. If Twitter is open to it, they could just add a button to Twitter, but they don't know about me yet. But that's just a matter of time. I mean, it's not impossible. There are a couple of ways to go, but that is also a big question that I have, whether people would even go to my website, a separate website, and translate all this stuff. But a lot of people would say that is a horrible idea and it's not going to work. A lot of people would say that's great. You'll have so much data, blah blah blah. But I don't trust any of those. I don't even ask people about, because I used to pitch the idea to everybody, and then I was like, I did not hear any valuable advice, and so I just kind of stopped because that's the problem with new ideas, is that it's new, and so nobody is in your head, and nobody really fully understands it. So there is no point in asking about how to go about it. So you just kind of do it, and you see what happens next.
Do you have any timeline for your MVP?
Well, so I had a plan before New Year's. I wrote out a plan, and the first quarter of 2020, I was supposed to finish my pitch deck, and It's not finished. So I have 2 weeks left. Maybe I will finish it because I have nowhere to go because it's coronavirus outside. So we'll see. Maybe I'll postpone it until May. But I just kind of I wasn't planning to build the actual app yet, but I just kind of got inspired, and I just did it in one night. And so now I actually.
Wait, so you have the app? You're just stuck on the pitch deck?
I mean, I guess. And the app needs work as well, but it's a work in progress.
Who is the pitch deck for?
Potential partners, potential investors. Who knows? I don't know. Again, you just send it out. You just let people know about you. I have no idea. I have no plan. That's not a great pitch from me. But I mean, I have different ways it could go. But yeah, I'm not. I am humble enough to know that neither of them will probably be exactly as it happens. Yeah. So timeline, I don't know, April, to have something presented in a good way. Yeah. So if somebody wants to partner with me, that would be great. If you want to steal the idea and do it, that's also great. Because I would be so happy to see it. Because I'm not sure how to do it myself. And if you figure it out before me, I would be like, cool. Let's connect.
If you already have the app, did you try to involve some translators so that they can start using it?
It's not ready for that.
Oh, it's not.
There is no interface. It's all backend. So I know how the technology works. I've already sort of wrote it out. But there is no usable interface. So if you know how to send requests with Python and you're a translator, then you can use my app.
Is it your solo project, or are you working with some of your Metamova team on this?
Yeah, so I've been kind of making changes inside my team, and so I'm about to involve another person and about to hire another NLP person, hopefully. And then I hope that we will have a working website. Maybe by June. We'll see how fast we can do this. But yeah, right now it's kind of financed out of my pocket, which is painful, but I guess that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Okay, so this was your next 5 or 10 years of life. On LinkedIn, you have this interesting thing as a description for your current role. It says, fixing the localization industry and doing real, no-nonsense NLP. Yes. So let's start with the first part, fixing the localization industry. You already mentioned a couple of things. So what do you think is wrong? What needs fixing?
Oh, I mean, yeah, we already kind of discussed it. I feel the way the value is distributed is completely wrong. I feel the chain is way too long, meaning that the client pays way too much and the translator gets way not enough. And then the money goes to something super ineffective. I think that money should either go to innovation or to the translator, not to 5 PMs that are handling the translation of one file. And I think the way it works right now, there are too many big players that are too big to move, and so they are slowly losing money and slowly paying the translators less and less, but still hoarding all of these resources, which makes very little sense to me. And I also feel like it's inevitable that they will collapse somehow. I mean, I do know about the future. I'm not an economist, but when I look at the decisions that they are forced to make, not even are making, they're kind of trapped due to their size. Feels like they will be unable to go on for much longer. And I want us to use that moment of collapse to build something that is beneficial to the actual translators, because the translators are the people that are passionate about language. They are creating something really cool. And I think they should get the value as opposed to the management who just wants to get more money. I don't think wanting money should be rewarded as much as wanting to create something cool.
Yeah, I think like when I was working on my startup long time ago, it was pretty much based on the same thesis as you just said. I thought like there's like a lot of middlemen in the whole process that take out the margins and increase the cost for the clients. But it's funny because like even like when we had our first chat, when you mentioned this, like it's inevitable that they're going to collapse, I always, in my mind, I see the final scene from Fight Club, all the skyscrapers
good.
exploding and burning.
That's good.
Can't
wait.
How do you actually have this experience like with these big players? Did you work with them? How do you know like how they operate, or that they're slow?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with them when I was a translator. I worked with them when I was doing engineering. I worked with all kinds of different companies, and just kind of got really closely acquainted to the work process and the workflows for different kinds of projects. And yeah, and I've worked with them for a long time. And I came with this attitude of like, let's fix it. Let's find a little bit of a free space where we can go and do something cool in like a startup form so that it can be adopted elsewhere. But that did not work. And I completely understand why. Like, I used to think, oh, you're just all, arrogant and you all want money. But right now I think, yeah, it's really hard to do that in those circumstances when you have a large company. It's not the people personally, but it's just that structure that ends up being toxic in that way. I mean, toxic is a really heavy word. I mean, toxic in terms of business, not in terms of emotion.
Did you ever have a chance to work with end clients?
Yeah, when I was, my BlaBlaCar job, that was an end client but BlaBlaCar, it was such a cool project to work on. But the problem is that they raised a lot of money. Like they were like one of the most successful startups in France. And so, somehow they knew that language mattered, and they insisted on not using vendors because they were focusing on building community in each country, right? Because they were trying to engage more people to use the website, because their website is just a platform. It works on attracting drivers and attracting passengers. So the language of the interface was really important to them. So they actually invested a lot of money into having on-site localization managers and localization engineers, and really nitpicking the translators and building really good relationships with the translators, maybe overpaying a bit because they wanted us to be happy. And I was working really hard to produce something that was really cool. And so I also had so much freedom. I didn't have to use, if something was a repetition in the memory, but it didn't match the context, I didn't have to use it, even if it was like a context repetition, right? If I didn't like an old translation, I could go and change all of the translations in the website. I had access to everything. I could test it immediately. And to them, it wasn't a loss. But if every single end client would do that, they would lose so much money. So to me, it was really exciting and it was a really creative kind of a job. But if I think, okay, what if Google tried to do that? Google has so much more stuff to translate into so many more languages that it doesn't make sense for them to give all of that freedom to every translator. I guess it makes more sense to make it really, really strict. But that was painful to me because a lot of the rules that Google had in terms of, the style guide, they didn't make any sense. And then in terms of engineering, there are no end clients for engineering, unfortunately.
Going back to the LinkedIn statement, so the second part is doing real, no-nonsense NLP.
Yes, I love that phrase.
So please explain.
Yeah, well...
Why do you think the NLP in other places is nonsense?
Oh, God. Well, NLP is part of data science, right? So NLP is just the language part of data science. It's the language part of artificial intelligence. And data science right now is a hype. It's a hype as the way blockchain was, maybe still is, a hype. So there are a lot of companies that really want to put AI on their website when they don't really need AI or when they need a much simpler solution. But it's just kind of really trendy to say, well, you get all of the stuff that you get from other companies, but we also put AI on top of that. And so while I was working in data science, I got so many requests from clients asking for like ridiculous stuff that was either impossible or just not needed. But also so many developers that have just background in development, but then they got into NLP later, they don't really think about language. And they start doing something really weird. Like they know neural networks, but they don't know about language structure. So they will start to solve the tiniest problem by training this huge neural network for a week, and then it will not perform well. To me, that is also nonsense. The way I approach NLP tasks is I think about the field of the language. I think about the language style. Who is using it? Why? How? And then I do this kind of like a linguistic data analysis. And I go and I do research in terms of like actual linguistics. Like I will go and read academic articles about like some assumptions people make about how we use different patterns in conversation, right? Like this super formal linguistic stuff. And then based on that, I can then decide which algorithm I will use. Because maybe sometimes you don't need a neural network to do this. Maybe you just need a couple of rules written down. Maybe you need like a simpler classifier. Maybe you need, I don't know, just regular expressions. Because that is faster to develop, cheaper, and then much faster in production. So when an industry becomes a hype, a lot of kind of people that are selling snake oil get into it. And then a lot of clients that really want to buy snake oil meet them, and then they start doing this mad AI stuff, and it doesn't work. Yeah, so I'm kind of really pragmatic in terms of that.
Okay, so that was the NLP journey. Yeah. Are there other things that you are curious about right now, other than NLP and like your startup and your vision?
Curious about? I've trying to learn music more, because I've been trying to learn it for years, but I have been spending more time on that. So I'm taking singing lessons and I'm learning piano. And I mean, I would say music is about as hard to learn as data science. It's just so complex. But yeah, that's kind of my hobby that I'm really into right now.
Are you approaching music like from the scientific side, or is it more like just like emotions and artistic expression?
I don't think I am neither like artistic or technical. I'm more, the way I learn things is kind of intuitive. So I just kind of I start doing something, and then it somehow starts to converge. So I've been trying to learn piano for a long time, and it's been really hard. But and hiring a tutor was not working for me, because the structure that she was using wasn't working for me. Usually people that are artistic and are trying to teach me something, I never get what they're trying to say. But then applying logic to music is also very weird. So I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna try and learn some songs. And now it's kind of starting to converge, all of this kind of bits of information that I've picked up. Now I'm like, oh, I get what a chord is. Like, I get what this, harmony is. And so now I'm starting to really I'm starting to play faster because it makes sense how the chords move. So that's really interesting that standard education doesn't really work for my brain. It's much better for me to just kind of do whatever feels good. And then years and years down the road, I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. When do you actually find time to develop yourself in music? So I know that when we had a call, you mentioned to me that you wake up at 1 p.m. usually.
No.
No?
I wake up, I make my way to the office at 1 p.m.
Which means you just open the door, right?
Yeah, I just open the door. I do not commute, so it makes it even worse. No, I wake up, I do yoga. I have to meditate, otherwise I will start to get super anxious. I need to do that. I kind of try to play some piano, maybe like work on some of my projects. That's just kind of like my time when I need to be alone. Sometimes I go take a singing lesson, whatever. So that's kind of the stuff that I do for myself. And then once all of that is done, I feel like I can go and work on the actual work. And usually it's like up until midnight, but I procrastinate a lot as well. So it's not... I mean, there are periods of time where I work really long days, but then my body kind of starts to go, that's not working for me. And then I do nothing for weeks. So I cannot say, I feel like people that say, well, I wake up at 5 a.m. and then I work 18 hours and then I sleep, for 4 hours. It's like, that's, I don't know, it's a lie.
How do you procrastinate?
Oh my God. Reading about coronavirus? I don't know. How do I procrastinate? I like to binge watch TV shows. Or I will be doing some research and then I will stumble upon an article that has no relevance to my research, but I will read it anyway because I'm interested. But then 3 hours later, I'm down this rabbit hole. Reading about information theory and like bits and bytes and Shannon whatever noise channel and which is super complicated. But I'm like, I should have used this mental energy for the other stuff, but I don't know. As I said at the beginning, I'm a nerd. Yeah.
I started with meditation fairly recently. I'm just using like some apps on my phone. So how do you approach meditation?
Oh my God, do you really want to go down this
Sure,
road?
why not?
I have a bunch of... I used to be an atheist and kind of super skeptical. And then it was just making me really depressed. And so I had to discover some sort of spirituality for myself. And now I have all of these different things that I listen to and do. But I feel like in order for meditation to stick, you have to just do whatever feels good. So if it doesn't feel good, I don't do it. And if it doesn't feel good to do like a way that I read about, I don't do it. I just try to sit down and not think, or think about something good. Or like try to feel something that I am repressing so that it doesn't, stay inside.
Do you do it on a daily basis, like at a specific time, or is it just only like when you find time or when you feel like you need a meditation?
Right now, by now it's a habit, so I probably do it every morning. If I'm feeling like if something is going on, I'm feeling really kind of stressed, I will do it twice a day. If I can't concentrate on work, I will go and meditate. I just developed a habit, and once I have a habit, it's very hard.
Do you use like a guided meditation or?
Sometimes, I don't use guided meditations for my morning meditations. I just kind of like set the timer for 20 minutes and I just sit.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I do like hypnosis guided meditations, which are so cool. Like, because I was trying to lucid dream. I've never had a lucid dream. Have you ever had a lucid dream?
I don't even know what it means.
It's like when you are in a dream, but you realize that you are in a dream,
Oh, yes,
but you're fully
yes,
conscious.
of course I had it. Yes,
You've had that?
Yes.
I've never had that. So I tried to do a guided meditation, but it's kind of like you lie down and you get hypnotized. Because the person is telling you like you can't move now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you sort of kind of go to sleep, but you are fully conscious still. So that is really interesting, and it's super long. It's like a few hours long, but I've done that a few times. And that was kind of...
So do you actually go to like some places for that? Are there people who help you to get into that state, or can you do it on your own?
I mean, you can go to a hypnotist, but I just found something on YouTube and listened to it. But there are a bunch of different stuff you can do with a hypnotist.
This is something that you may not be comfortable, so just let me know. I would like to ask if you could share like maybe some failures or just one, like in your life, whether it's professional or personal, and like how you view that moment now.
Oh my god. I don't look at things as failures because I try not to try. I just kind of I've let go of this need to judge myself, to be like, why did you do that way, and why did you say that thing? Because now I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'm a human.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't call them failures. I would say it's like a maybe down points in your
Mm-hmm.
life that
Mm-hmm.
kind of lead you to something else. What is the biggest one I could think of? I mean, I was in a relationship for a long time, and then it ended, and I got super, super depressed, and it lasted for years. And it got really, really dark. And if you go to my Facebook page, I posted some stuff about that. Just because I wanted people to know that, you know, if you're feeling really, really dark right now, I found a way to not feel that way. So that's a bit of hope for you. But yeah, it was like I didn't want to be here anymore because it was too hard. But yeah, so I guess I would call it like mental failure, because my brain just didn't want to function anymore. It didn't want to get out of bed or feel anything. But I don't think it's a failure. I think it was a really great experience for me to have. I think it at the end of the day, it made me happier once I went through that, and kind of made me know who I am better. And then, I mean, during my depression, I probably failed a couple of jobs, but I don't really judge myself for that either. The first year of my company, I could probably have done some stuff better, but once again, like, nobody could give me the right, like, there is no person that you can ask that will tell you what to do, you know? Like, you can ask yourself, that's all you can do. So, yeah, I probably made some bad decisions, but I think I wouldn't change anything. Yeah, I don't know. I try not to judge myself that way.
What are you excited about in 2020?
The inevitable collapse of the economy from the coronavirus. I mean, I guess I had some things that I was excited about a week ago, and now it's like, I'm excited to be alive for another week. Okay, it's a joke. What am I excited about? Everything. I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a great year. I have some really cool new projects. I'm excited to finish them and sort of present them and see those startups that I'm working for do well. I'm excited about my sort of Twitter translation thing. I really want to see where that goes. What are the plans that I had for this year? I had them. They were so specific. I am excited to start singing and start sort of posting some stuff on social media. I think that would be really fun. I just joined Twitter in January for the first time. And everybody's like so tired of Twitter, and I'm like, this is cool. I like this. I'm gonna tweet every day.
So what is your Twitter handle?
Yes, follow me on Twitter. It's Oksana is so meta. It's all one word. Yeah, so follow me on there. I'm sometimes funny in the times of a crisis. Yeah, I feel like in 2020 I will possibly move. Planning that, not sure how that is going to go. And just kind of probably change my social circle, so that would be cool.
Do you mean outside of Ukraine or?
Yes, outside of Ukraine. I feel like that would be a good step in my career. Make a lot of sense.
Where would you like to go? Is it more like US, like where all the innovation usually starts?
Yeah, I would like to go to the US. I can't really explain why. It's just something I would like to do. Hopefully, the planes will start flying soon, before the end of the year. Yeah, I would just like to have that experience and see how it goes. Maybe I will be like, no, and leave in 6 months, but who knows?
Do you want to keep your current team in Ukraine and work with them remotely?
Yes, because it's really great setup. Like, it's really, outsourcing to Ukraine is an excellent idea because we have, a great office setup. The cost of living is much lower, and if compared to San Francisco, doing the development here is, and we have so many great, educated, intelligent professionals here. You can create a really great team. Grammarly, basically their whole office is in Kiev.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they didn't. Once I really wanted to work there, and they didn't hire me because they do NLP, which was probably a good decision on their part at the time. Yeah, so like Grammarly is a big sort of. It's not a startup anymore. It's a big successful company, but they do basically everything from Kiev. So yeah, I think I would like to leave, and also I like my guys. I don't want to leave my company.
Yeah. But then you also said that you want to change your social circle. So I guess you meant people outside of work. Can you maybe expand on that? Like why you want to change? Like what are the people that you hang out with?
I just want to. Oh man. I'm going to offend some people. I need to be really careful answering this question. No. Yeah, I just want to, growing up in Ukraine, you grow up with a very specific mindset. And it's getting a little old for me. And I don't know, because I've never lived anywhere else. So I don't know how that experience will go. But I feel like I need to have it, to maybe feel a bit more understood, because right now just my interests and the things that I'm passionate about aren't really aligning with the people that I hang out with. Yeah. So I'm kind of like trying to find my tribe, if that is not too lame.
No, it's not. I totally get you. I'm originally from Slovakia.
Did you feel the same way?
Yes, always. But it's also like part of it is like inside my head, because I don't think I share this with a lot of people, especially not publicly on the podcast. But like when I was in Czech Republic, because I also call it kind of my home because I went there to study university. But I always felt that like I need to get out of these post-Soviet countries, partially because of the mindset of the people, and also partial because I didn't feel like I fit in when it comes to how I look like. So yeah. So yeah, but that's pretty much in my head. Like I have very good friends in Czech Republic. So you can always find like, you know, like the niche, I think anywhere. But yeah, it's definitely a great experience to go and live in different countries. I live in so many different countries. I lived in Asia, now I live in Canada. So yeah, I definitely recommend it to you. And also from what you're sharing with me, I feel like there are like a lot of similarities between us. So yeah, you should definitely give it a try.
Which country resonated the most?
Right now, I'm very happy where I am first of all, because of the colleagues that I have. Many of them are my friends right now. Also because of the work that I do. Also because of the work that I do outside of my work, which is something that I really just want to do. Like, for example, like podcasts and creating content and using it as a leverage, like for what I want to do later. And also I just dance a lot more than I used to do before.
Just randomly dance, just in your apartment?
Yeah. So that I don't have to take classes, you know, especially now with coronavirus, I don't want to go out. But also the classes here
okay.
are quite costly if you want to do it like very rigorously, like everyday practice. So that would cost a lot of money. So I just have some like online classes that I just paid like $100 for a year. It's kind of like an online tutorials.
You can do dance classes online?
Yeah. Like you have so many things that you can do online. You can even do, you know, like these cycling classes. There's like yeah. And cycling, I think, you know, it's Tim Ferriss. You know Tim Ferriss, I assume.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah. So one of his advertisements on his podcast, I think it's called Peloton, something like that.
Oh, that's a spin.
Yes.
Spin.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're at home, but it feels like, I don't know, I don't have the practical experience, but it feels like you're actually attending a class with other people.
Because I thought cycling that you go outside and you're on your bike, but you are staring at your phone, which seemed really dangerous.
Yes.
Like learning to bike online. No, yeah, Peloton. I used to really like spin classes, and you really need that kind of a community because it's very easy to quit when it's that intense. So I guess it's a kind of a cool idea to do that.
Yeah, I think many people need the social aspect to do something. I'm actually quite happy because I can push myself. I have the discipline to do things just on my own. Like, for example, the dancing, you know, like I do it every day. Like I've been doing it for like the last month. If I do it for maybe 6 months and 1 year, maybe then I can say like, okay, I actually have the discipline. But I think discipline is like very important because like you can plan everything that you want to do. But if in the end you just don't do it, you know, it's useless. Anyway, things that you change your mind about.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is, I just, I guess I used to be like, I'm going to come and fix everything, and everything is wrong the way it works. I think now I have more appreciation for the structures that people put there before I came.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it was like I was young. I mean, it was a year ago or a year and a half ago. But when you are in your 20s, that's a long time. So I think I had like a bit of a youthful arrogance. And now I kind of appreciate, you know, you don't know what you don't know, right? That's that syndrome. And now I just I've come down. And I still don't like when things aren't right, but I don't need them to be perfect, you know?
Is it about not liking or accepting the situation, or is it more that before that you used to blame or judge the people for getting into that situation?
I don't think I judged them. I just didn't understand. It was like, why are you doing this by hand if you could automate it, right? Like, it was so frustrating to me to see people just make peace with this sad life that they were having. But now I'm like, no, but this actually makes more economic sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are larger forces in work than just the, innovation. That was a big one. I've changed my approach to so many things. Because I used to be like, all of this is, so, I have a task and I start to do the task. And I start with, all of this is wrong. I'm just going to make everything from scratch. And now I go, well, no, let's keep everything as it is, but let's make an addition that makes somebody's life a bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that works for me much better.
Okay. Favorite cat tool?
MemoQ.
Favorite software in general?
Favorite software?
Or app, whatever.
What? Okay, let's see.
Isn't it Twitter?
Maybe Twitter. Twitter is pretty good. PyCharm, I'm looking at it right now. It's like an IDE for programming. It's really cool.
Sorry, what is it? What is the name?
It's called PyCharm.
PyCharm.
To make programming easier.
Mm-hmm.
What do I use on my phone? Telegram. I love Telegram.
Mm-hmm. That's a messaging app, right?
Yes. Because it's nobody saves your data and there's just basically no limitations. It's pretty cool. Podcasts. I love to listen to podcasts. That is something that I use all day, every day. YouTube as well.
Favorite word in Ukrainian?
Okay, so when I was like 12 years old, I had this weird habit of, like, because I was learning English and stuff, I would write down weird new words on my calendar. But I found this Ukrainian word, and it was navarla. And nobody uses this word anymore. Or I guess in some regions they use it. But navarla basically means like inside out. But it sounds almost like Spanish to me. It just sounded so good. And I wrote it down and I looked at it like every time I would sit down on my desk. At my desk, I would look at it. And now it's just in my memory forever. Yeah. And also it represents like the Ukrainian phonetic system so well because we have these open vowels and these like rolled R's.
Favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show? Currently it's Better Call Saul.
Mm-hmm. Is there a new season out or?
Yes.
The fourth season?
4 episodes. Yes.
4th season?
So good.
Okay.
So good. But also when I was younger, I really used to like Dr. House. Do you remember this show?
I do.
I was obsessed with it. I would watch it.
Oh yeah, you say when you were younger, yeah. Yeah, also when I was younger, in my 20s. Yeah, I was just thinking that I'm just like him. Like, I care about fixing the problems, but I don't care about the patients that much.
I just recently binge watched it and I was like, he needs some therapy.
Oh gosh, thank you. Yeah.
But okay, so I used to be obsessed with it and I would watch it over and over and over again and I would have all of the episodes and I would have all of the like subtitles and I would read all of these complicated medical things. But when I rewatched it recently, I started to finally notice the actual metaphors, what it was really about, because I completely ignored them before. But his leg pain is like sadness, like he is ignoring his depression. And so the more he ignores it, the more his leg hurts. And then there was this episode when he was in love with Kadi and he realized that he was in love, but he wouldn't tell her. And he had this like mosquito in his apartment and it bit him. And he had this like big thing that was scratching. And Wilson, his friend, was like, do you realize that is a physical manifestation of love? And he was like, what? I was like, oh, that is so good. Like every kind of emotion in that TV show is somehow represented through a physical element, And it was just so brilliant.
Who is your favorite fictional character?
Martin Eden.
Who is that?
You've never read Martin Eden?
No, I don't know what it is. Never.
Okay, so the writer Jack London. He used to write about like wolves and whatever.
Okay.
But he wrote this novel called Martin Eden, which is also, I just reread it again and my mind was blown. So when I read it when I was like 12 or 13. It's basically about this guy, Martin Eden, he's super poor, and he comes from this poor family, and he's like strong, working on a ship, and like very kind of simple, And he meets this woman who is beautiful and rich and, really impressive. And he decides to get smart for her. And so he starts to read all of these books and become, more and more educated. And then he becomes so educated that he realizes that like he understands more about politics and whatever than other people. And he starts to write. And he is really against socialism. So he's like very kind of libertarian, right? And he keeps just preaching that, Darwinism and the strongest should survive, and he has this belief system. And then at the end, this is a spoiler, but at the end he basically kills himself because he realizes that he got so smart that lady that he was in love with, now she wants him, but he's like, you're a hypocrite, and you're kind of not deep enough for me anymore. And then nothing kind of makes him happy anymore, and he kind of kills himself. And so when I was small, to me, and read it, to me there was like a tragedy, because I felt like, oh, he finally made a man out of himself, and then he had to die, and that is so horrible. And now when I read it a year ago, I was like, oh, this is like an ode to socialism, because it basically says he believed in an individual so much that he completely neglected that being alone made him so unhappy that he killed himself. You know what I mean? So it's also very much like in Dr. House. It has several layers where you can read it and misunderstand it completely, but when you kind of read between the lines, it's like it was very kind of a troll move, to mask to kind of basically say socialism is great, but kind of mask it behind the story about this brilliant man. So yeah, you should read the book. Even it doesn't matter that now you know that he dies at the end. It's not that important.
Is there anything I should have asked you, but I didn't?
I think you asked me everything.
Everything.
You know everything about me now.
Okay. I think I didn't ask one thing. When I was stalking your Facebook, I think I prepared like one question. Do you dance? I think I saw something. Like in one video you were like moving, kind of like dancing.
It was a GIF that when I was 16, I like made it for my boyfriend because I was sick and we couldn't see each other. So I made like this goofy dance. That's probably what I posted.
Okay.
But I do not dance. I'm not physically gifted in any way. I cannot move. Yeah, sorry. I can sing though, so you can, I can sing and you can dance.
Okay, maybe next time. Okay, final words. This is your moment where you get to speak to the minds of the localization industry. What would you tell them?
Okay. Start something, like start a thing of your own. I think business is kind of misrepresented because people that are in business, they tend to tell us, well, only the strongest, the smartest, the richest one can start a business. And we also tend to think that the only reason to start a business is to make some money. And I think all of that is false. I think there are so many wonderful reasons to start a business apart from making money. And I think so many different people, apart from like a type A, male, white, Zuckerberg person, they can do it, and they can manage a team or manage a project or whatever in so many different creative ways. And just because there is no example of somebody like you doing it, that doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's a great way. I started my business because I didn't like the jobs that I was offered. And I created a job for myself. And I haven't had a job interview for 2 years at least. So I believe it's like the future of our changing economy is to go and create a job for yourself so that you can do what makes you happy, but also make money out of it. And then eventually all these small entrepreneurs will kind of connect into this network that works much better than the capitalism that we see right now. So even if it doesn't bring you a lot of money, even if you have to spend money to do it, but it makes you happy, just go and do it. And don't ask for permission. Don't ask for advice, because just give yourself the permission and just go and do it. Yep, that's my final word.
Thank you. Awesome. This was a real pleasure. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be in touch.
For sure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.